If you're in Houston this week for NAPE, there's a very good chance that you will continue to hear the tagline, NAPE, where deals happen. But the reality is that if your approach this week isn't quite where it needs to be, or your mindset or your focus isn't there, then the tagline for you might be NAPE, where mistakes happen. And maybe those mistakes are you or your company spending a couple $100 million more than you should have on some subpar asset. Or maybe they're mistakes that you make by saying or doing something at a happy hour or an after party that tarnishes your reputation or the reputation of your company. But regardless of those mistakes and where they come from, the reality is mistakes will be made this week. But the other reality is that there are plenty of things that you can do to help prevent those mistakes from happening in the first place, most of which surround asking the right questions and being in the right state of mind and being aware as you go through your business this week. And so today, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to use the same energy-themed coaching framework that I use in all of my coaching. And I'm going to weave in some NAPE-related themes and questions, again, to help you navigate NAPE this week. And even if you're not at NAPE, I promise that these questions are going to be equally relevant, and they should be questions that you and your stakeholders and your company and really everyone else are asking on a regular basis to make sure that you are not unwittingly setting yourself up for mistakes. And so jumping right in, the first phase of this energy framework, this leadership framework that brings those two worlds together is the exploration phase. And of course, what are you doing in the exploration phase? Well, you're looking for something and you have some ultimate objective, right? But the problem is that objective is often masked by some, say, intermediate or incomplete identity. And at NAPE this week, that identity might be summed up as buyer or seller. Or maybe that identity is service provider, or maybe that identity is like me this week, a networker, a generic attendee. But that identity doesn't obviously tell the full story. The full story is what is your, ultimate goal for being part of this conference? Well, mine isn't just to meet people and network. Sure, that sounds great. Sure, I'm excited about that. But it's more than that. It's to listen. It's to ask questions. It's to get a deeper understanding of what people's challenges are, what they're looking for, what they're hoping to accomplish, so that I, in turn, can improve my services and help people more effectively. Same thing. If you happen to be buying an asset this week, you're not just going down there to purchase 10 or 20,000 acres of some bolt-on acreage in some specific county in some specific play. Yeah, that might be your stated intention. But you have some bigger objective, right? You, or at least your company or whoever sent you down there, has some bigger goal in mind. It's to complete that transaction, to complete that deal so that something even bigger can happen. Whether it's to make more money, whether it's to, flip things and sell to somebody else that wants your assets to be a little bit more firmed up, whatever the case might be, you have some ultimate objective. But if you don't have that in mind as you go through your day, you're going to wind up with more surface level conversations, surface level interactions, and potentially deals that don't make long-term success because you had some short-sighted vision. So again, ask yourself, what is your ultimate objective? What do you hope to accomplish from all of the activity that happens this week at NAPE? Moving on to the next phase, the development phase. Because of course, once you have your vision and your objectives in mind, you need to come up with some sort of way to execute upon that vision, right? Some sort of strategy. But the reality is that a lot of the strategies that you might be employing, or certainly other people and companies might be employing, are quite frankly outdated. And you know this. I don't need to tell you that there's outdated strategies. And my hope is if you're there evaluating some prospect, that you're not just using some spreadsheet that you've been using for the last 5 or 10 years, or relying on the same 1 or 2 people within your company who make a decision, yay or nay. No, hopefully you're moving towards newer tools, better tools. But at the same time, ask yourself, are you going too far in another direction? Are you over-relying on these newer, sexier tools and AI and machine learning and all those things? They're all good. But is your strategy being driven by, whatever feelings that you might have or whatever the most popular thing is? Or are you consciously choosing strategies that make the most sense for you? And the way to answer that question, of course, is by asking the question, is the strategy that you're employing while you're at NAPE, while you're executing deals, while you're networking, is it effective? Are you just handing out business cards and having casual small talk? Or are you, going for something deeper and deeper relationships, and more sustainable relationships? So regardless of what your identity is this week, what is the strategy you're employing? And is it effective for what your ultimate objective is? Moving on to the next phase, the production phase. Because obviously you don't do all this for no reason. You're hoping to produce results. Well, the problem is, of course, that sometimes results don't speak for themselves. Probably the best example, if not cliched example of this, is if you drilled a single well in a field in some particular play. Well, that single well, if it's unbounded by any other wells, that production is not going to be indicative of how good it is, right? It could have some sky-high IP and even sustain production, but you're not going to make a deal based on that one well, of course, unless you have some other information. No, because it could misrepresent how good or bad that well is. And the same thing can happen when you're interacting with people, or if you're in a company in a position where you're evaluating talent, especially as companies consolidate and the realities of mergers and acquisitions come to play. Are you evaluating talent based on good, solid, meaningful results that do indicate where the best talent is? Or is it a little bit more subjective than you would like? And this is a fear that I hear from a lot of HR representatives within energy, because all of this stuff is going on and things are moving so fast, but yet, the reality is there's people who are stuck, and maybe the results haven't filtered to the top, or maybe those results, again, aren't indicative of what they're capable of. And conversely, there's people who have risen to the top and, those results don't necessarily reflect the quality and the potential of that individual going forward. So again, ask yourself, as you're ingesting all of this information, whether it's people or assets, do the results that you see and that you're hearing speak for themselves? Moving on to the next phase, the transportation phase or the midstream phase. This is where you need to ask yourself about your communication strategy. Is it effective? Are you able to get your message across in as effective a manner as possible? And the number one thing I want you to ask is, are you unwittingly showing signs of corrosion in your messaging? Are you unwittingly setting yourself up for people to walk away from you because they think that you're pushing them away, even though you're not intending to do it? And again, it's a simple question. Ask yourself, are you unconsciously sending some sort of message that other people might be turned off by? And so ask yourself, how are the words that you're saying, how might they be received? Take a second to listen to yourself among the hundreds of conversations that you're going to have this week. And finally, in the distribution phase, this is where we recognize that we are in a commodity business, which means that, the product that we're selling for all intents and purposes is the same as, what everybody else is selling. Yeah, there's differences in the properties of oil, and obviously there's wet gas and dry gas and all that. But at the end of the day, it's a commodity business, which means you need to differentiate yourself in some way, somehow. So how are you doing that? Well, from an individual standpoint, I hope you're not just going down the path of some sort of gimmick, right? Hey, everybody else is wearing a blue blazer this week, so I'm going to wear something crazy. Yeah, okay, that might get you noticed. But is that a real differentiator? I would say no. From my experience, the answer is no. To really differentiate yourself and to avoid becoming a commodity, what you need to do is have a full understanding of everything we just talked about, to have these things in mind, to have a clear picture of your objective and your strategy and how you're going about it and how you're communicating. When you're aware of that in and of itself is a differentiator, and it will prevent you from being commoditized. And I say this, not just, having seen this work and the results of all of this as I work with people, but I say this even in my own life, in my own career, because I've been able to differentiate myself as a coach among the thousands of other leadership coaches that are out there, because I have a clear focus. I focus on the oil and gas industry. My experience reflects that. I've been in this industry. I understand both the left and the right side of this firsthand. And I've been able to parlay that into stronger, more sustainable relationships and results. And I'm proud of that, but more so than anything, I'm happy to share all of this with you because it comes down to asking the right questions along the way. And so if you're interested in asking me any questions this week at NAPE, or you just want to say hello or interact in some way, feel free to reach out to me via email at joe@winningpartners.com, or certainly send a message here on LinkedIn, because I'd be happy to meet you in person. I'd be happy to discuss some of this. I'd be happy to share some of the results that others have achieved by following this strategy. And either way, I certainly hope you have a great week, an enjoyable week, and a week that is filled with more deals and interactions and positivity than mistakes.